Welcome to Leadership Luminaries Lounge with Kerry and Peggy O'Neill, a podcast about the connection of leadership, philosophy, practice, and impact on society. Get ready to be illuminated.
Welcome back. Now we're going to have part two of our conversation with Daley Harris, and it's been so inspiring and interesting that we're excited to be able to spend this time with him. So Sam, as a reminder, founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby Results in 1980, co-founded the Microcredit Summit campaign in 1995, and founded Civic Courage in 2012. The 2024 edition of Sam's Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy was named an editor's pick by Publishers Weekly Book Life. Akosha founder Bill Drayton said, Daley Harris is one of the certified great social entrepreneurs of the last decades, and we have definitely been hearing about that, and we're about to hear some more. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for being here for part two. Our audience, but Sam and Kerry, really happy to continue this conversation.
Sam, again, it's a pleasure to have you here. And one of the things we were kind of talking about in the earlier part of the conversation is dealing with staffs of organizations to be able to deal with volunteers. And I wanted to get your insights on how do you help the staff be able to get over that fear of making a big ask for volunteers to be able to move the organization forward.
Right. Well, let me say, I'm going to go backwards for a second and then get directly what you asked. I think, again, that story of self, knowing your why and sharing it is part of the equation. It's like, why does this organization, why does this company matter to me and to the community and to the nation or world? And being clear about that kind of thing, out of which would come a big ask. And we want to know, what is the ask? And if I'm asking it of someone, I actually then need to deliver. And I'm going to give you an example in a moment. But one of the qualities then that I would go to is practice. If there's a big ask to be made, I need to practice making it. And then the number two is like seeing that it matters, seeing the result. And I'm going to give you an example in my work, but it could extrapolate out. I was coaching this organization. Their focus was not just getting to net zero carbon emissions, but to removing carbon that was already in the atmosphere. So they wanted to get to net zero, but they also wanted to remove. Yeah. And so one of the big asks as they stood in front of 10 people or 20 people to start a new chapter was, we're going to start this chapter with a 4-part new group training every week for 4 weeks or every other week for 8 weeks, 90 minutes each time. Well, that's a big ask of people. And you could look at 20 in the room and think, no one's going to say yes to that. I'm going to just make it a tiny little ask, or ask it apologetically or whatever. And I'll make a tiny ask and they'll do tiny things and then nothing will happen. Well, I was talking to this fella in Seattle, and he said to me they were going to have their first ever national webinar, and he was going to do a grassroots victory. And he was telling me that the group was 2 or 3 months old, a baby, the chapter, and they'd already met with 4 state legislators. And one of them was chair of the Committee on Energy and Environment in the state legislature, and said, I'd like you to brief my staff, my committee staff, and see if we could get some legislation going. I said, well, wait a minute. You've met with 2 state senators, 2 state reps in the 2 or 3 months that you've been a chapter. He said, yeah. I said, had you ever met with an elected official before this? No, I'd never done that. I said, had you ever written to or spoken to an elected official? No, I'd never written, spoke, met with them. This was all new to me. And I said, put that in your talk, because people are going to think, oh, he's an expert. I'm not an expert. He could do this. I couldn't do this. Let them know you'd never done it before. The reason that he could do it, I say, is because a big ask was made of a 4-part new group training. And in the training, they learned how to get the appointment, how to plan for the appointment, what to ask for in the appointment. And if the staffer had not made the big ask for part new group training, this group would have floundered or not gotten started or not known what to do. And so there was it was quite obvious that making the big ask mattered, amounted to something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in a company, I mean, I think you want to know what the ask is, why you're asking it, practice the ask, and then observe that it mattered to have made it and to have followed through on it, kind of thing. So, you know, one of the things I'll just give you, if the ask is, let's say there are 20 in the room and we're going to start the chapter, and 10 raise their hand and say, I'm in, I'll start with the 4-part new group training. I always work with the staffer to call those 10 a day or two later and say, thank you for joining the chapter. What moved you to join in? What do you hope to get out of it? Do you need a ride to the first training? You know, that just because you asked, they've never been to that training. It's a new behavior. What are you going to put in place to help make sure that it comes to fruition?
Yeah, I mean, that's all fabulous. And so I'll say true. I used to work for a transformational training company. And so we had lots of volunteers that worked, I mean, that volunteered to participate in this organization and had events, and they're supposed to invite people to events and everything. And what I learned from one of my mentors as I was leading this organization in New York City, is that people actually love to be challenged. That we hold people we're afraid to ask, oh, what if they don't like it? But when we challenge them to big asks, then at some level, I mean, they might go a little bit kicking and screaming because, oh, you know, I'm busy, but at some level they know, oh, they believe in me. They believe in me. And then, like you're saying, if we follow through, follow up and support, then they can rise up. And that's what most people want. Most people want to be challenged. They want to play bigger than they are. They want to feel more alive, more engaged. And so that speaks to them in a way that they go, oh, somebody believes in me. Okay. Yeah.
It's a kind of, who do you want to be in the world?
Right.
You know?
You know, I like that little comment that you said early on. Ask for small things, you get small things or nothing. And so if you're going to go through the energy, if you're going to ask, why not make it significant and try to get something important done? It makes a lot
You
of
know, when I was starting Results, which should have been 1980, it was kind of should I, shouldn't I kind of thing. It wasn't like 100%, but there was this quote from futurist and inventor Buckminster Fuller, who said, the things to do are the things that need doing, that you see need to be done, and that no one else seems to see needs to be done. Well, I'd asked 7,000 students what the name of the member of Congress, and fewer than 3% could answer correctly, and the experts called for the political will. So I saw something that needed to be done and that not too many others seemed to see, you know, and I was always bolstered by these various quotes, as you could tell from the earlier episode where I was sharing a bunch of quotes that have really mattered to me. I'm going to share one other, because you asked earlier in the earlier episode about how do you get over people's like inactivity and kind of thing. There's this quote that I used recently from Paul Hawken, who developed is it Smith and Hawken, the tools company? And anyway, the quote that he said was, it's estimated that between 98 and 99% of humanity is disengaged. Oh, your friends might be engaged, but between 98 and 99% of humanity is disengaged. From the Earth's point of view, there's no difference between a climate denier and someone who understands the problem, but actually doesn't do anything. But anyway, so there's
you know, one of the things we spend a good bit of time, I do anyway, spending a good bit of time in talking about and thinking about, and you may not have had a chance to think too much about this, but in your work with anti-poverty, I'm really curious about your thoughts in the change in technology that and the change in the relationship of income and work and all of those things that are represented by artificial intelligence coming of age now. And one of the things that, and a little just my general observation, it seems like that this tool has the capability of transforming even more than the internet, because basically it's building on the internet and moving even further. But it allows now the disintermediation and the elimination of a lot of labor that was thought to be higher income work. Information handlers, those telephone ladies that were before, if you extrapolate that down to other areas, that's what the people do in offices, is that they take information from one source and they put it into another source, and they become the handlers of that information. So now you have information technology and artificial intelligence and generative AI that can disintermediate that, and now you don't need the modern day enhanced telephone ladies. What do we do about that now to ensure that we don't end up creating more poverty because of increases in productivity?
Yeah, to be honest, it's not a field of expertise for me. It's
Mhm.
not something I've really dived into. So I see what you're saying about the lack of jobs, really, that could easily accompany. Now, there's lots of work to do in communities if we can figure out a way to pay people to do that kind of work. But yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that I've, and again, I'm thinking and building some hypothesis in my head around those kind of things, and doing work on looking at conscious capitalism and purpose focus of organizations. And they were talking about the authors of the conscious capital movement were pointing out the amount of people that were disengaged in for-profit work, but the number of people that were engaged in working for not-for-profit. So just as a trial thought, kind of giving another big ask of your opinion here, what do you think about a massive change in ownership so that we move away from labor-based working in the organization to being more entrepreneurial, kind of like those ladies that are doing things and that Muhammad Yunus was pointing out in Bangladesh.
yeah.
More of us become owners of capital production and production of services, or we own a piece of the major corporation and then use our labor to do the good works of the heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I was in a meeting, this is a long 20 years ago or more, with Muhammad Yunus and two US senators.
Mm.
That's was one of the senators. He was a major Senate leader. He said, but do you think people are entrepreneurial? And Muhammad Yunus said, originally, yeah, they were. They couldn't get a job, or originally they were hunter gatherers, and they had to figure out some way to. So we started out entrepreneurial, and then maybe we lost it somewhere along the way. But it's, he said, if you scratch the surface,
So
there's an entrepreneur under there. So
we need to get back to our roots, our
that's,
entrepreneurial
well,
roots to
hopefully we
survive.
won't exactly be hunter gatherers again, exactly, but still, yeah, I think there's more in people ability wise. And he would say to students, and I'm thinking again 10, 15 years ago more, he would say, don't be a job seeker, be a job generator. This is what he would say to students particularly in the country and outside too. But there's
It's back to the big ask. It's like, okay, there are a lot of changes happening in the world. And so rather than waiting on somebody else to come up with a solution or to get it fixed for you, I mean, Kerry and I talk about this a lot, that there's hero worship is over. It's like, but we've been so indoctrinated and culturated into, oh, there's a hero. A hero will save the day, but that's just become outdated. And like, you mentioned several times community, that probably that's the next hero, if you will. I mean, it's going to be community that actually is the next archetype, I guess is the way to say that,
Yeah.
instead of the hero, because that's just outdated. But I think we've been, a lot of us have been, some people call it like a spell. We're under a spell that somebody else is going to fix it and save us, instead of this big ask of asking all of us to say, okay, what's happening now? And then what do I feel needs to be
Kind of
done?
get-
And then how can I step up and
Yeah.
do that? And
It gets back to that early question from the earlier conversation. We aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth.
no,
We're the crew.
Really true.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
if we are, how does crew operate?
they see something and they go, oh, I better go do this now, because we're up out
Exactly.
there in space.
Yeah.
And
You know, that I kind of like that other quote that you used too, where basically you see the work that needs to get done as not being done, and do it. So you know,
That's
you may be in doing something else, but you see what needs to be done, and you have the ability to do something about it, then do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's essentially the calling of an entrepreneur, which of course we're all entrepreneurs and we can hear the call.
Well, Peggy, would you like to ask the wrap-up question here? But before we do that, Sam, is there anything that you would like to share with the audience of leaders, of being able to think about transformational advocacy, making the big ask? What would you say is a key takeaway from this couple of episodes that we spent together?
Let me say a couple of things. One is, if there's something in this conversation that they find useful, contact me and let me know if you'd like a speaker or whatever. It's something we can do. We really need to put ourselves in a structure of support that can encourage this. Not, I heard it once, because then we're going to get slapped around by bad news and whatever, and we lose it. We got to get ourselves in a community, a structure of support that encourages that bigger vision. And I think that's really important. And I think there are lessons in reclaiming our democracy. And at the website, you can find more out about it, reclaimingourdemocracy.com. And you can find ways to connect with me and connect with the book, etc. And I think that would be useful.
In our credits, we're going to make sure we share your information about your book and how to get in touch with you.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm not shy about sharing a lot about my why, but in a lot of the pieces, Peggy knows it. But one of the eclectic parts of my why and who I am is I'm also a minister in the Christian faith. And so there's a parable that I really, a lot of parables that kind of fit in me. And it talks about the good news is kind of like a person that sowed his seed, and he sowed it across all kind of different ground. And so he sowed it across one part of ground on the rocks, and the birds came and ate it up right away. And when you said that, you get slapped around by hearing, and hearing it, but then you don't do anything about it and you don't get it reinforced. And so it just goes away because all of the bad news and the other things that are around you go away. The other seeds, some seeds fell into ground that was shallow and not good earth. And so it sprung up right away and it seemed to be flourishing, but then the heat of the day came along and it withered away. And so you need to have some sustaining power to be able to get over those tough times. But then the last parable was some of the seed fell into good ground, and it produced tens of multiples of output from the seeds that were created. So I like that idea of what you're saying is that you need to find your good ground.
Yes.
Stop hanging out around the rocks in the shallow earth.
Yeah.
Find some good ground and to reinforce what you're trying to do.
And I would add, can your company or can your nonprofit create that good ground
Yes.
so we can find it right where you are in terms of your coworkers and employees, etc.
Peggy, I promised to let you ask the last question.
I'll just go off of that. So if an organization hadn't really thought about it this way before, what would be the suggestion you would have for what to do to get this ground nurtured? Any
Well,
particular?
I mean, I think there are two levels. One is with the kind of advocacy that a company needs to do for its own work and its own mission.
Mhm.
And then perhaps the kind of advocacy it wants and needs to do to contribute to the community
Mm,
beyond its business.
mm,
So it might be that a company has some kind of extra mission regarding youth sports or
mm,
playgrounds in the community, or I don't know what. And is there some kind of engagement with the city council or with the school board or with
mm,
that can enhance that work?
mm,
I'm speaking now some community service work, or if it amounts to something that the company itself needs for its own business to succeed.
mhm,
How do we engage others in the company, not just the main person or two, but the larger body, to not only engage for the betterment of the company, but for their own engagement as citizens and to experience the power
mhm.
of active citizenship.
Yeah, beautiful. This has been a fabulous conversation, Sam.
It has. Sam, thank you so much for being our guest today. Our guest again is Sam Daley Harris, the author of Reclaiming Our Democracy and a wealth of information about transformational advocacy. And so in our credits, we'll make sure that you get his contact information and feel free to reach out to Sam and to learn more about transformational advocacy and how to put it to work in your organization and how to take charge in making a difference in our world. And as I get to claim the credit of always saying, let your light shine. Thank you for being with us today.